Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavosdin, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which I think count.
Wow, I'm glad you think that, Dan. I'm Mischievous Marchinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man. But in my opinion, Dan, and this is really goes beyond opinion. I think in terms of facts, the annuals don't count.
Well, Mark, I'm very happy that you believe that, if only to keep this delightful banter going. Yes, of course, because this is the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider Man comic universe. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
If you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app. Every other week, we put out a mainline episode of our flagship show, and sprinkled in between, we review new comics as well as interview some of the greatest Spider Man creators of yesterday and today. This is the perfect time to start listening. Today on the show, Dan and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 77, entitled Beyond Chapter 3. This issue was written by Kelly Thompson, with pencils and inks by Sara Pichelli, colors by Nolan Woodard, with a cover by Arthur Adams and Alejandro Sanchez, and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on October 27th, 2021. Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened in this comic?
Yeah, I'm going to do a brief summary here. So, there's not much of a follow up on the events of the last issue, but here we join Ben Reilly as he spars with Misty Knight and Colleen Wing. He's being observed by Marcus and Maxine Danger, the heads of the Beyond Corporation. Maxine talks with Ben and reminds him of how many resources Beyond has been putting into him to make him a great Spider-Man, but wonders if he's been taking the role a little bit light. If he won't keep them updated on all of his activities as Spider-Man, she insists that he can be replaced. Yep, she's definitely not gaslighting him. Ben conveys that he does want to be the Spider-Man to Dr. Kafka, who he also tells a story about his Uncle Ben, but weirdly forgets how the story ends, as if that memory had been removed. Kafka suggests perhaps he's just stressed out, but I think we all know better. Meanwhile, Aunt May and MJ run through their Rolodex of Avengers contacts for who could help provide Peter the best treatment while he's in a coma. They're all weirdly unavailable, so Aunt May suggests that she's going to take matters into her own hands, while Felicia Hardy spies on them through the window. Additionally, as Ben Reilly returns to his girlfriend Janice, she complains of being in a gilded cage but knows it's one of the few options she has. Ben has to cut their conversation short and jumps through a portal to investigate a break-in at Midtown. It is Morbius, and he's surrounded by dead people. He's transformed into more of a monster than normal, but Ben tries the peaceful approach. It doesn't work, and Morbius seizes Ben, biting down on his neck as the issue ends. So that is Amazing Spider-Man number 77, or what is it, 878? Mark, what did you think of the issue overall?
I mean, it was fine. I gotta be honest. I mean, from a sheer content standpoint, there was nothing too memorable here. But like at the same time, I found this very enjoyable in like that kind of brand new day way. I mean, this really does remind me of Brand New Day in so many ways, even with Ben Reilly as the lead instead of Peter. It's just kind of these simple, fun Spider-Man stories, and this is no different so far. What about you?
Yeah, I felt almost exactly the same way. I was pleased to see it kind of feel tonally and writer wise like it didn't feel discordant with the previous two chapters that we got, but this definitely seemed like a kind of settle in chapter or the first part of a two-part story, and that is very Brand New Day. And in my mind, that's a good thing, which is to say, like, not every Spider-Man story needs to shock and amaze us. Like, we can just have a nice little character piece that moves a bunch of pieces forward and gives us a villain of the week. And, if you're going to be publishing it as fast as they're doing this, like, this is the kind of stuff I want. So, Like, am I going to remember this issue forever? Probably not. But I didn't mind checking in on some of my friends, new and old, in an issue like this.
Mm.
I did want to
Uh,
note, though, we do have a new creative team on this book, and we've kind of been touting this as the first like truly female written Amazing Spider-Man non-annual book, and maybe even the first Amazing Spider-Man illustrated by a woman. And in researching this to talk about this episode, I realized actually that's not correct. There was one other issue. I mean, one whole other issue. Unless, of course,
in
I'm
over
doubly
800.
incorrect. Yeah, right. And the last time I can tell, as far as I can tell, the last time I can think of there being a female writer on the book was 1987. So 35 years ago. In Amazing Spider-Man 295. That would be Ann Nesenti and Cindy Martin doing the art. And this was part of that Mad Dogs Ward storyline that crossed over a bunch of Spider-Man titles. So truly, that was the only reason that we got a story from a female writer and artist, was because it was really like kind of planned out in the pages of other books. And
Right.
do I think
Well,
that?
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, for context, I mean, at that point in time, like, Jim Salicrup had just taken over Amazing Spider-Man, so like they were kind of going over some, going through some inventory stories before David Michelinie and Tom McFarlane would take over. So, you had Craven's Last Hunt, which, I don't mean to dismiss that as just an inventory story, but it was an inventory story for what it happens to be a great one.
Yeah.
But but other stories of that, and Mad Dog's War was another one. I mean, they kind of spread that out among the other titles, but yeah, I mean, like it really wasn't like, it wasn't supposed to be this big coming out party in terms of, female empowerment in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. It just so happened to be released that way.
Well, it's funny because this one doesn't really seem like a big grand party of it either. It just seems like any other issue of Amazing Spider-Man, which I think is kind of nice, right? Like this is how it should be, which is to say anybody could write a good Spider-Man comic. So why haven't we gotten anybody up to this point? And it's been almost exclusively white, men of a certain age that have taken on this title. And I think there are some nice moments in this issue that have like female characters that are maybe more prominent and more involved in the forward momentum of the story than usual. But if you handed me this comic, I don't think I would know, other than my knowledge of Kelly Thompson and Sara Pichelli's very distinct art. I don't think it would shout out to me like female involvement. But I think that's a good thing. It's like, your gender shouldn't really influence, the quality of a comic or the contents of a comic, in any way. And so great. Let's bring on, we've got 800 some issues to go to balance the scales here, to make this book truly
Right.
representative of, the world of writers that could be doing this. So, I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to call it out because, it's an important moment, even if it's not the first. It
Right.
feels like the first because it's the first that felt like it was truly done with the intention of highlighting a woman taking over both the writing and art duties.
Right. And clearly not an inventory story. I mean, this is part of the scheme, which is, I mean, frankly, my note about it too. I mean, like, regardless of who, the gender of who's writing, I mean, I think the handoff from creative team to creative team was going to be one of the big things to look out for with this Beyond arc. And, in terms of first test, I think this was a successful one. I mean, like, I didn't necessarily love all the dynamics of this issue as much as I did the first two, but that had nothing to do with the creative team. It was just like, oh, okay, like this is, the focus here was a little more of a cool down after two very momentous issues that preceded it. But like, in terms of like trying to tell this longer form story, I feel like these all felt pretty seamless.
Yeah. So, Mark, I have a long history with reading Kelly Thompson stuff at Marvel and elsewhere. I don't know if you have any history with her as a writer. Did you get any sense of a
No,
voice from her here?
not yet. I got to be honest. I mean, like I mean, and we'll get into this in a little later in our review. I mean, like I did like her character work for sure. I felt like like she had a good grasp of all of these characters and really got into their heads in a good way. But I didn't get a defining thing, and and not to be critical, um, the art from Pichelli wasn't as I love Sara Pichelli's artwork. I mean, like her stuff with Miles Morales to me is some of the finest Spider-Man comic book artwork we've ever had. And I felt this was kind of lacking that polish. Maybe because even though I believe this comic was delayed a week, but even still, like maybe like the kind of aggressive timeline of these comics kind of made her rush through it a little bit. I know Pichelli tends to work a little more methodically, but I didn't get but no, I mean in terms of narrative voice, I didn't get anything too distinctive. It kind of felt in the flow of what again what preceded it with Zeb Wells a little bit. I mean, it was a good sense. The sense of humor was there, which I appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's anything that stood out to me, it was her sense of humor. Her sense of humor tends to be kind of like I don't know if non sequitur is the right thing, but she created the character of Jeff the land shark, right? Like she has kind
Mm.
of a silly sense of humor, and I think you could see that a little bit here in how she began to kind of bring in almost like the next wave Agents of Hate silliness, where the Beyond Corporation was first established, and those things like some of the jokiness with Ben worked for me. The kind of other stuff felt a little bit like discordant and distracting. And so like, if I didn't know her already, again, I think she would just feel like another cog in the wheel of this story, which is also just to her credit, like, fitting in with Zeb Wells and making it feel of a piece shows an ability to adapt that I appreciate. And that's kind of more in line with classic Spider-Man writing, which is to say, don't reinvent the wheel when you take over a book. You're a part of a continuing legacy, as Ron Friends
Right.
would often say to us. And this felt of that kind of thing. And I agree with you on the Pichelli. It felt a little bit rushed. I think especially on the Morbius pages, to me, felt
Mm.
a little bit
Hmm.
sloppy. But I always appreciate how she can, one, dress these characters.
Mm.
Everybody's got a distinct something about them. Whether it's you've got the female boss. I'm forgetting her name, Maxine. Her kind of like pink, extreme haircut. Down to just like the interaction between Ben and Janice was like really like their emotions and the way Ben was opening himself up to Kafka. Everybody feels much younger and more full of energy when through Pichelli's pen or pencil, as it were, although she inked herself here. So I like that. But I will say her Ben does not look like Peter to me.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, I kind of feel like even Gleason kind of was trying to separate the characters a bit. And, in one breath, I kind of get that because it's like, do you really want to be playing with the whole, well, how can people tell these people apart?
Yeah.
But at the same token, they are clones. So it's not just the blonde hair. They should look alike. So it's this, I have a feeling this might be a problem, not just with Pacelli's art, but throughout this run. I think maybe artists are going a little too far in trying to separate the two characters out from looking too similar from each other.
He looked very Andrew Garfield to me
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
issue. And some people will say, well, Andrew Garfield looks like Peter Parker, but like he looks a bit less. He looked like much younger than I expect to see Peter Parker in this comic. But I mean, either way, like her inks are always just so delicate, and that really renders a lot of these kind of touching scenes. You know, I think the highlight here being the scenes with Kafka and Janice. You know, are really felt emotional to me. So I appreciate getting that from her. What do you think of like Ben's characterization here? Like this issue, as notably, at least to me, fewer kind of like internal captions from Ben. Did that impact your experience of the comic at all?
Not particular. I mean, it's funny that you say that because, like, yeah, there was less inner monologuing, but I feel like this issue, I mean, very intentionally because we didn't get any Peter monologue at all in this book. I mean, the only Peter we got was, him basically being an inanimate, not a corpse, but an inanimate object in a bed. I felt like of all the three issues that we've had so far with Beyond, that this was the most focused on Ben and Ben's character as Spider-Man. Yeah, I mean, it would have been nicer to be inside his head more, but like I felt that there were enough little lines and drops from Ben throughout this comic that the distinguishment of how Ben is different than Peter, not just the hubris that I think kind of came across in those first two issues, but just some other subtle things that came across that like I notably at the very beginning, when this arc was first announced, I said I don't know if I really need to spend time with Ben Reilly again, but like this comic kind of got me into the idea of spending time with Ben Reilly again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I still feel a little bit distant from him, but specifically in regards to how he feels about the Beyond Corporation. Like, I don't know if how he feels about the situation he's found himself in. And I think that might also just be to how quickly that was set up in like the free comic book day issue bleeding into this. It's just like, boom, he's a part of this. And I don't really know how I feel about how he feels about that. And I'm hoping that we get a little bit more, but all of the kind of like really internal personal stuff is not really addressing that yet. It seems much more interested in this idea of him like desiring to reposition himself away from being like the other Spider-Man, the guy that like comes in and out of town every once in a while and disrupts things. He wants to kind of like have a legacy all his own as Spider-Man and feel like he fits in that role, which I think we've kind of seen before, but this seems like a more sensitive touch to that, so I like that about him. But I do feel like by now I wish I had at least a little bit of an idea about how he feels about going about this through Beyond. Because he could certainly just wear a Spider-Man suit and go out and do it. What attracts him about being involved with this company, other than the fact that they seem to be able to spring his girlfriend from jail? So that's just something I'm still curious about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a speculative answer for that. I mean, I do think one of the most telling lines in this whole comic was, when Maxine is kind of pressuring him, not pressuring him, but haggling him about, his commitment to this, and are you in this to win it, kind of a thing. And he turns around and just says very simple, "I am Spider-Man," and like to me that those words, I mean, it's just a few words, but it really tells a whole lot of Ben's story here because, and we kind of got this in a little bit in the last issue when Peter is, before he goes into his coma, kind of like says, look, you have every right to this as much as I do. And like, I think this is kind of going to be the prevailing theme here. Which we didn't, I don't know if we got it as much in the Clone Saga, but like this idea that like, this isn't just, Ben is not just a guy who looks like Peter who is pretending to do this here. Like, I mean, like he is staking a claim that is every right his, because in his brain, he's as much Spider-Man as Peter is, like like and like, to me that's always one of the things in the Clone Saga that kind of over time got lost, was this idea that Ben is just kind of a pretender, and wasn't actually supposed to be Spider-Man. And I like that he's establishing earlier, like, no, I am Spider-Man. He is, and you can't deny it. That it's just, we have this technicality that kind of defines the character and has defined him for years now. But like in reality, he's Spider-Man as much as Peter's Spider-Man. So why shouldn't he just stake that claim?
I also really enjoy some of, like you were saying, the subtle kind of character differences between him and Peter. Like, to me, he seems like a more kind of calm-headed Spider-Man, or more rational, or less rash, if you will. Peter is kind of defined by like jumping into conflict without thinking it through. And
Right.
I mean, I think we see a little bit of that here in Ben, but like I like that. There is. I don't feel like Peter would trust beyond implicitly. Like, I think he would be inherently skeptical in a way that Ben doesn't seem to be. But also, like, I mean, to me, the biggest tell is how he treats Morbius, because like historically, and we've joked about this on the show before, like Peter, the minute he sees Morbius, just starts throwing fists. Like he just can't help himself but like beat up on this guy. He does not have the same compassion for him that he has for the Lizard. Whereas like Ben, like explicitly approaches Morbius with like a more peaceful manner first. And I was like, well, that's the tell, because Peter would never act that way. He would just like try to destroy Morbius straight away. So I thought that was interesting about the character. But like I said, I think the more they draw out this kind of like inherent trust of Beyond, like the less we're going to be able to relate to Ben, because he just kind of seems kind of dumb, because we all don't trust Beyond already, right? So like I'm waiting. I'm okay with him being in the dark for a bit longer, but there will be like kind of like diminishing returns, I think, on that if we remain this far ahead of the character for so long.
That's a good point. Anything else about the Ben characterization you want to bring up?
Not really. I mean, I think this Janice thing, to me, like not having read this in like 20 some years, like I still want to see it fleshed out a little bit more. I do think that they're playing with the thing I was talking about in our last review, which is that like she's like kind of being designed to play the Mary Jane role from like the 90s, which is to say like, I'll just be here waiting for you in this beautiful apartment. And she's pushing back on that here, which I think is kind of neat, right? Like it's like a character that's trying to escape a trope that is being set up for them. And I'm all for it. I think that's really interesting.
Very cool. All right, Danny, want me to talk a little bit about the Slack?
Yeah, tell us about the Slack, Mark.
So yeah, hundreds of listeners like you hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans on Slack. The amazing Spider Slack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics, and more.
Yeah, I hang out there all the time, and I'm always eager to dive in the day that these issues come out just to kind of see what everybody's saying about them. I try to hold back a little bit because I want to talk about it with you, Mark, for the first time. But like, people do these long threads where we're all discussing the ins and outs of all these issues. So yeah, if you want to join this awesome Spider-Man community, just follow the link in the description and be sure to say hi. And once you're there, let us know what you thought of our review of the episode. Did we cover everything you wanted to hear about? We want to hear it all. Okay, let's get back to discussing Amazing Spider-Man 77. Mark, you wanted to talk about Colleen Wing and Misty Knight.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So, it's funny. You started out by saying that, this wasn't like a big female empowerment issue, and I tend to agree, although, certainly kind of a new wrinkle for a Spider-Man comic is the extensive involvement of these two characters who, obviously are two very prominent female characters in the Marvel universe. I don't know. Like I'm not. This has nothing to do with gender, but like their role in this story just seems to kind of take me out of it so far. I mean, and I felt this way when we had the little teaser story. I believe it was at the end of the first Beyond issue, or
Yeah.
was that okay? Yeah. Um, I just don't associate these characters with Spider-Man, and I guess it makes sense. Like, hey, it's Ben Reilly, so he should have his own supporting cast. But like, I don't know. There's a part of me that's just kind of like, what's up with these two? I don't know. I'm not getting a sense of, and maybe it's just how they're being written so far in these stories. But like, they just feel very perfunctory, and there's not a lot of layers here. And I don't know. Like, they're not drawing me in any kind of meaningful way so far.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it really feels like they're just there to set up that .BEY issue that we're going to get starring
Yeah.
them. You know, I mean, part of me, I mean, I think they're fine. I don't really understand what their association with Beyond is, and that's maybe my biggest problem. It's like I just don't get what that relationship is, and I don't really have much of a connection to Misty Knight or Colleen Wing as characters on their own. And this gets to my whole thing. It's like it's also part of like the hastiness of like who or what Beyond is. Like it's been a long time since I've read Next Wave Agents of Hate, which I'm gonna need to do a reread. But like I think the whole Beyond thing is kind of nebulous, and so like the relationship with people other than Spider-Man also feels like kind of discordant to me. So I'm like, I don't know how this all fits or works or what we're supposed to think about it. So yeah, I feel that totally, Mark. They don't feel like an extension of Beyond more than they feel like, you know, Thor flying by with a hammer saying "Read my comic." Um,
Yes. I was gonna say like I keep looking like what's coming up in like pop culture that involves these two that is essential. I mean we already got the Defenders Netflix show, so what is it?
and you know, if I have to be truly like my skeptical self, I'm like, oh, well, this is like a Nick Loweism, right? Which is to say, like this, and it's hard. It's maybe not fair to blame it on him, but this is like the Spider-Man line has to sell a certain number of comics, which means there needs to be a lot of side stories that branch off of it. And we saw, you know, Dan Slott and Nick Spencer leap through these hoops of like establishing a Black Cat series or setting up, you know, X, Y, and Z. And, you know, this to me feels like these two are primed to get their own series. And this is the setup work, which is like what you have to do if you're a Marvel writer, but they can't help but feel a little bit like tangential from the main plot. I don't think it's like offensive, but it does feel discordant
No.
to me. Yeah.
I will say to their credit, like the one of the scenes with the two characters they mentioned to Ben after like his little trial scene or whatever you want to call it, like, oh, you were slow to your was it slow to his right, slow to his left, whatever it was, and there was a part of me that wonders when we got the scene with Morbius when Morbius kind of got the jump on him, was that kind of premeditated, that were we predicting that was going to happen, that there was something off about Ben, that his reflexes weren't quite all there? I don't know, just a thought, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, he does say in that scene, like, "Oh, I am slow on my right. She was right." Are you suggesting
Yeah,
that like that's a Beyond thing?
I don't know. I mean, well, we're going to get into this other weird mystery that came up regarding the Uncle Ben memory, but like, yeah, I mean, there seems to be, they seem to be establishing that something is off with Ben so far, and like that could be one of those things.
And you know, speaking to like Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, we do get like a scene where they're separated from Ben because they need to be outfitted with technology per Beyond's request, right? And we've already started speculating that like, you know, Beyond is behind, you know, the knockout of Peter Parker because he wasn't fitted with the equipment. So we're seeing this kind of repeated story beat. So, you know, you're right. Like, who's to say what level of connection there is between all of this? What do you think about Morbius being a part of this? I mean, it's kind of out of left field, but I thought it was kind of cool.
It definitely is. I mean, like, again, like I feel like the last two times Morbius showed up in Spider-Man, it was to set up either a solo series or something like that. So I'm like kind of like checking the solicits, and then I was like, wait, is the movie coming out yet? No, it's not coming out yet, right? I mean, that
No,
that movie isn't supposed to come out for a while, right?
I think we have a few more
But
months. Yeah.
okay, but at the same token, like I I did kind of appreciate. I mean, you mentioned like Ben's kind of like you know, I come in peace approach with him. But beyond that, like Morbius like seems like legitimately scary and a threat here, which we haven't had in a really long time. I mean, like Morbius has kind of always been played more, I feel like recently as, misunderstood and shades of gray, blah 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 blah. But like this time around, it's like, no, this guy is literally out for blood and is a threat and gets the jump on Ben, and it's bad, like and like it kind of brought me back to the Bronze Age Morbius, and I'm like, all right, yeah, if this is how the character was portrayed for the last 15, 20 years, I'd be more into it. But like, I kind of feel they softened him up too much. So I thought this was a good return to force for the character.
Well, Mark, if you do want to read more like modern Morbius that's not softened up, he had a mini series a short time ago, and it's really violent. Like Morbius is
Okay.
this is where he gets his wings that you see in this issue.
Mm-hmm.
He's like kind of like tries to cure himself, but it pushes his transformation even further, and it's like a really really violent, extreme Morbius series, and it really changed the character in a big way, which I think we're seeing some of the results of here. So, like at the very least, I felt like my time was valued in reading that Morbius miniseries, which I enjoyed in its own right. But I thought this is so extreme where I'm never going to see this in the pages of Spider-Man, and here it was. I still think there must be like.
Mm.
My read here is there's some mix-up or miscommunication going on, which is typical of Morbius. But I'm curious because it is in line with that mini series. So just thought it worth mentioning for listeners who might want to go check that out to see where these wings came from.
Yeah, definitely. So Dan, I alluded to it a few minutes ago. What do you think about this whole scene with Ben and Dr. Kafka and him trying like, telling like an Uncle Ben story and then all of a sudden like forgetting the punchline to it?
Yeah, well, it seems like it's a bad version of our old bad improv at
Mm,
the end of our
you're right.
episodes, but I genuinely have no idea what to make of this. I mean, I think it continues off that whole visual idea that we saw in issue 75, that really creepy image of like Ben's face. And I'll admit, like, I think I didn't want to admit that I didn't really get what that image was getting at in that issue. Like, I was like, okay, like it's a nightmare. I don't like, is there some more profound thing that I'm supposed to be taking away of like why Ben's face is a giant hole with like teeth and there are spiders everywhere? And to me here, it seems to suggest like, hey, there's something much more frightening going on here.
Mm.
But I don't know what to make of it because like that was Peter's memory that was doing that, or a nightmare that was doing that, and this is Ben. So like, I have no idea what it means. That like, I mean, you could take it just at face value, which is to say like, oh, he's really tired, and Kafka was right. He just needs to take a break. But like,
Mm.
I don't think so. Mark, am I reading into it
No,
too
I
much,
don't think.
or yeah?
No, I think you're reading into it a good amount. Is it an incident where I won't say no, Dan, you're overreading it. No, I mean, like to me, it was more like it's just a byproduct of Ben kind of selling out to Beyond. You know what I mean? Like, is he like kind of losing a part of himself by being in, or I mean, are they affecting his memories? Because of his involvement with them. I mean, like we're already establishing that these people want a certain amount of control over Ben. So are they manipulating how he thinks? I don't know. You know what I mean? But like, there's definitely something very sinister going on here, and I don't think that this memory loss thing was an accident.
I mean, the other question is like Kafka seems a little bit surprised, or like the way she's drawn doesn't make her seem like she's manipulating him, right? She seems like a genuine therapist that's trying to offer him good advice, right? But like she could also be an agent of Beyond that is manipulating him psychologically, which is really interesting. But I think up to this point we've not seen that. She seems kind of, a benign part of Ben's life. So I'm not ready to claim anything wicked about Kafka, but I don't know. There's also that play of like between Ben and Janice about like I'm half, what does he say?
Cockroach.
Yeah, half cockroach. So there is maybe this like they're introducing the idea of like metamorphosis, and it's like maybe he is undergoing some kind of slow, granular change that we're seeing play out here. I don't know. It's really it caught me off guard, and I think of the issue, it was the most interesting thing to me. Like even more than the mystery of like what's beyond, or what's behind Beyond. Like when you start dealing with like forgetting Uncle Ben stories, then we're dealing with like a central fabric of these characters like splintering away. Is it clone degeneration? Who could really say one way or the other?
Well, lots to speculate about. But Dan, do you have a grade for this one?
Yeah, this one's like a solid B- to me. Like it's not one I'll remember for terribly long, but like keep up the quality Spider-Man comics.
Yep, I'm right there with you. B- for me too. I mean, like I said, this wasn't like a big barn burner for me, but like I enjoyed it, and I continue to enjoy this arc. That there's no way around it.
Yeah, it's just cool to think like I love that they're keeping this kind of like logo on the cover, like Beyond Chapter 3. Like the idea that we're like getting chapters 1 through 19 and it's going to be a closed unit is really exciting to me. Like, do I want the sexy, like fun, pun rich titles that they give each issue? Yeah, I miss those. But like to feel like this is going to be some contained thing, it continues to excite me as someone who's interested in storytelling. So there is that. Well, anyway, as we begin to close things out, I do want to say, if you find this show entertaining and valuable, please consider supporting us. Recommend Amazing Spider Talk to a friend. And if you're able, like, why not become a member on our Patreon?
Yeah, because we can only bring you this content with the support of our Patreon members, and we owe the show's success to every single one of them. We are constantly making exclusive content for our members.
Yeah, so why not take $3.99, the sometimes price of a new comic, and put it towards a month's subscription to support the show and start receiving our Patreon content. That way you'll hear our Patreon exclusive review podcasts on every new issue of Amazing Spider-Man the same week it comes out, instead of waiting for it to arrive in our public podcasting feed.
And if you contribute $10 a month, you gain access to exclusive artwork from famous Spider-Man artists commissioned exclusively for our members. This season, we'll be mailing out a print by artist Ron Friends. He's created a lost page of The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man for us, which was inked by Brett Breeding, depicting Tim and Spidey sharing laughs over Tim's Spider-Man comic collection. Plus, every episode, we release a new episode-specific desktop background created for us by artist Nick Cagnetti for our patrons to enjoy.
And those are so amazing. But yeah, we know this is a hard time for everybody. The pandemic is wrapping up. Christmas season is coming here. Expenses are tight. So we don't want anyone to, support us or give us money if it brings you any hardship of any kind. You can just listen and share the show. That would mean the world to us. But again, if you do have the means, we'd love to have you join our Patreon club. It would be great to have you there, and so you can enjoy it as much as we enjoy making the content, and allow us to keep doing this show. So there's a link in the description of the episode that'll guide you to all the information you need to join on board. And again, a thank you to all the members who already make this show possible.
Yes, Dan, but alas, it is that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
As always, this episode was edited by Rick Coast. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friend, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser, and our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. As we just said, this episode was originally released on Patreon as a live stream hangout with us back when the comic was first released. So if you'd like to help support our show's continued existence and these very reviews while joining us on the live stream, why not head on over to our Patreon and sign up? So, Mark, bringing this show to a close. Until you forget all about Uncle Ben and that one time he was killed by Joey the Elbow, what's our motto?
Joey the Elbow. That's a throwback.
Yeah.
The motto, of course, is with great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging out and supporting us.
Thanks, everyone.
Too many who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, that's Wednesday's afternoon. They'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing Spider Talk. The amazing